Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I worked the night shift at a gas station off Highway 19, about 15 miles from the nearest town. It's one of those lonely spots where travelers stop for gas, truckers grab coffee, and the occasional lost soul stumbles in just to use the restroom. I've worked here long enough to know the rhythm of the night, the way the fluorescent lights hum, how the security cameras flicker every now and then, how the distant howl of coyotes carries through the empty lot when there's no one around. But there are things that don't fit into the rhythm, things that make the back of your neck prickle. Things that make the shadows feel a little deeper, a little hungrier. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I heard the crunch of tires over gravel. A dark blue sedan pulled up to pump 3. Nothing strange about that. What was strange was the way the driver came out. Fast, almost stumbling, her phone clutched in one shaking hand. She wasn't just in a hurry. She was terrified. She pushed through the doors, her eyes darting around like she was expecting something, someone, to follow her inside. Her breath came in short, frantic gasps. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I asked, stepping out from behind counter. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Then, in a voice so low I almost didn't hear it, she whispered, "I need you to call the police. I think someone's in my back seat." For a second, I thought I hadn't heard her right. Then my stomach dropped. I've read stories like this before, seen the urban legends online, the kind where some poor soul drives home, completely unaware that there's a stranger crouched behind them, waiting for just the right moment. But those are just stories, right? Are you sure? I asked, already moving toward the door. She nodded frantically. I saw him in my rear view. Just a shape at first. I thought it was my imagination, but then he moved. She swallowed hard. I didn't know what to do. I just drove. I didn't want to stop, but I saw your lights and she broke off, wrapping her arms around herself like she was holding her body together. The station was mostly empty. A semi had pulled in earlier, its driver asleep in the cab. The security cameras showed nothing but the cold glow of the gas pumps, the empty highway stretching into the darkness. I took a slow step toward the glass doors, peering out at her car. The windows were fogged from the cold. I couldn't see much inside, but something felt wrong. The back of my neck tingled, that deep animal part of my brain screaming at me to run. The store doors slid open with a quiet hiss. Someone walked in. Not just someone. Him. He was tall, with greasy hair and sunken eyes. His face stretched into something that barely resembled a smile. His clothes were dark, wrinkled, like he'd been sleeping in them for days, or hiding in the back seat of a stranger's car. His gaze flicked to me, then to her. "You left your car unlocked," he said. His voice was low, smooth, almost amused. The woman let out a choked sob. The air in the store felt heavier, thicker. It was the kind of fear that pressed down on you, made it hard to breathe. I didn't think. I reached under the counter and grabbed the baseball bat we kept for situations just like this, though I'd never actually had to use it before. I stepped in front of her. "Get out." My voice was steady, but my hands were clenched so tight around the bat that my knuckles turned white. The man didn't move. He just tilted his head, that horrible grin widening. "Relax," he said. "I was just keeping her company." My stomach twisted. There was something wrong about the way he said it. Like he wasn't just talking about tonight. Like he'd been in that back seat for longer than she knew. Then, from somewhere outside, I heard the distant wail of sirens. The man's smile faltered. He took a slow step backward, then another. And then, without another word, he turned and walked out. The automatic doors slid shut behind him, but I didn't move. I watched him go, every muscle in my body locked tight, waiting for him to try something. He didn't. He just walked, right past her car, right past the pumps, into the darkness. By the time the cops arrived, he was gone. They searched the area, checked the security cameras. Nothing. Just a few blurry frames of movement before he vanished into the night. The woman was too shaken to drive, so an officer took her home. She thanked me, but I could barely hear her over the blood pounding in my ears. I've worked a lot of nights at this gas station. I've seen some weird things. But that night, that was the first time I truly felt afraid. And to this day, before I get into my car, I always check the back seat. Story 2. I worked the graveyard shift at a gas station off a lonely stretch of highway. It's the kind of place that only exists in the dead hours of the night. A flickering island of fluorescence surrounded by miles and miles of nothing. Truckers pass through, a few night owls. Occasionally, some poor soul running on fumes, desperate to make it to the next town. But mostly, it's just me and the hum of the overhead lights. That's why I noticed him right away. It was just after 3 a.m. I was in the middle of restocking the shelves, mindlessly arranging bags of chips, when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. Movement just beyond the gas pumps. A figure standing under the dim glow of the overhead lights. At first, I thought it was just another late-night traveler stretching their legs. But then I looked closer. He was tall. Too tall, maybe. Lanky, with a frame that seemed stretched like a shadow cast at the wrong angle. He wore a white button-up shirt and khaki pants. Ordinary enough. But his face, his mouth was spread into an unnaturally wide grin. Lips pulled back too far, exposing too many teeth. And he didn't blink. Not once. I froze, my fingers tightening around the bag of chips in my hand. The air in the store felt suddenly too still, like everything had paused, waiting. He just stood there, not moving, not pumping gas, not checking his phone, just smiling at me through the glass. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to look away. This wasn't the first time I'd dealt with weirdos at night. Drunks, tweakers, lost travelers with wild eyes. But something about this man made my skin crawl. I turned back to the shelf, trying to focus on my work. A few minutes passed. I convinced myself he was probably just messing with me. Maybe some guy who thought it was funny to freak out the lonely gas station attendant. But when I glanced up again, he was closer, still outside, still standing, still smiling. The only thing that had changed was the distance. A cold, creeping dread slid down my spine. The automatic doors were shut, locked unless someone got close enough to trigger the sensor. He hadn't moved fast. I hadn't seen him take a step. And yet, there he was, now standing just a few feet from the glass doors. His grin hadn't changed. Neither had his eyes. Wide, unblinking, fixed on me. My breath hitched. The store felt too quiet, the buzzing lights too loud in my ears. The doors slid open, but he didn't step inside. He just stood there on the threshold, smiling. "Sir, do you need something?" I asked. My voice came out weaker than I wanted it to. No response. Just that goddamn grin. Then he started laughing. Soft at first. A low chuckle, like he just heard a joke and was trying to stifle it. Then it grew, swelling into something shrill, unnatural, like the sound of a radio picking up static just before the station cuts out. I stumbled backward, my hands shaking. "Hey man, if you're messing with me, I'll call the cops." The laughter stopped, dead silence, and then he tilted his head just slightly, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. And then he moved, not walked, moved. One moment he was standing in the doorway. The next, he was at the end of the candy aisle, inside the store. I didn't see him take a step. I didn't hear a sound. One blink, and he was there. My chest seized with panic. I bolted for the back office, slamming the door shut behind me, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. My hands fumbled for the lock, twisting it into place. The store was silent again. I grabbed the landline and punched in 911, my fingers barely working. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone in the store. I gasped. He was outside, and now he's... A sharp, static-filled click interrupted me. The line went dead. My breath hitched in my throat. The phone slipped from my hand. On the security monitor, I saw him. He was standing in front of the office door, grinning. Still, not blinking. I pressed my back against the wall, squeezing my eyes shut. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I'd fallen asleep at the counter. Or this was just a weird nightmare. And then, 3 slow knocks. Soft, rhythmic, deliberate. I held my breath. Another knock. Then silence. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. I didn't dare move. At some point, I must have blacked out, because the next thing I remember is the sound of my manager's voice shaking me awake. Jesus, man, what the hell happened in here? I bolted upright, gasping for air. The store was bright with morning light. The security monitor showed nothing but an empty store. The automatic doors were locked, just like I'd left them. But the weirdest part, the cameras never caught him. Not outside, not inside, not anywhere. Like he was never there. But I know what I saw. And sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I feel him watching. Just beyond the pumps. Still smiling. Story 3. The cold that night was the kind that made your bones ache. The kind that settled in deep and stayed there, no matter how many layers you wore. Out here at this little gas station off Route 47, winter didn't just whisper, it howled. And that night, it felt like it was howling just for me. It was just after 2 a.m., and I was the only one on shift. The road outside was dead, not a single pair of headlights in either direction. The security cameras flickered in their usual grainy black and white, displaying the pumps, the empty parking lot, and the small stretch of highway beyond. That's when I saw her. She was standing near the air pump, just outside the glow of the overhead lights. Barefoot, her dress, if you could call it that, was tattered and thin, barely more than a slip of cloth against her pale skin. Her hair was long and tangled, hanging over her face like wet seaweed. I watched her for a moment, waiting for her to move, to step forward, to give me some sign that she was normal. She didn't. She just stood there, unmoving, like a mannequin someone had forgotten in the cold. I glanced at the security monitors again. She wasn't on the screen. A slow chill crawled up my spine, colder than the winter wind outside. I turned back to the window. She was closer. Not by much, but enough. Maybe a foot or two. I hadn't seen her move. I swallowed and forced myself to step away from the counter. Maybe she needed help. Maybe she was in some kind of trouble. That's what I told myself. Anyway, I pushed open the door, and the cold hit me like a wall. My breath curled in front of me in thick white puffs. "Ma'am," my voice came out thin, uncertain. She didn't respond. I took a step closer. The air around me felt wrong. Thicker, heavier, like walking through molasses. Then she moved. Not a normal movement. Not a step. Not a shift of weight. It was like a glitch in a bad video. 1 second, she was 5 feet away. The next, she was right in front of me. I stumbled back, my heart slamming against my ribs. I saw her face. Or rather, I didn't. There was nothing. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just smooth, pale skin stretching from her forehead to her chin. I gasped. My legs went weak, and I nearly collapsed. The air around her was freezing, colder than anything I'd ever felt. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. Then she tilted her head. Not like a person, not like something alive. It was a slow, unnatural motion, as if she was studying me. I ran. I didn't think. I just turned and bolted back inside, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly, I fumbled the lock twice before getting it to click into place. I grabbed my phone and dialed my coworker, who was on break, sitting in his car behind the station. "Get back here. Now." He laughed. Thought I was joking. I didn't have time to argue. I glanced at the security monitor again, my breath hitching in my throat. She wasn't there. Not on the screen. Not outside the window. Just gone. But the cold remained. It lingered in the air, curling around my skin like icy fingers. My breath still fogged in front of me, even inside the heated store. 10 minutes later, my coworker walked in, still chuckling. Then he saw my face. The laughter died in his throat. "Jesus, man, you look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't answer. I just sat there, shaking, trying to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, I had imagined the whole thing. But then he looked down. His expression changed. Why the hell are there wet footprints on the floor? I followed his gaze. Bare footprints. Small, delicate, leading from the door to where I was sitting. But here's the thing. The door had never opened. I never worked a night shift alone again.